Hello from Coolangatta Airport, Gold Coast Airport here in Australia. I'm awaiting the arrival of my Qantas Boeing 737-800 from Sydney. I'll be boarding that aircraft for a flight back to Sydney. Quite a short flight, just about an hour from the Gold Coast down to Sydney, flying in business class. So an opportunity to experience and test out the Qantas domestic business class product, which is much nicer than what you'll find on most European airlines. So let's give it a go.
Traveling the world on planes, trains, trams, and more. Join Mark Hopwood as he shows you some of the great journeys he's made. Let's travel to a whole variety of destinations. Remember to drop your comment below, like and subscribe, turn on the notification button, and never miss a video.
Qantas 595 then from Coolangatta to Sydney. Relatively short flight by Australian standards, flying inland as that's the shortest route. Back in December 23 on a Qantas 737-800. Lots of economy seats for just 3 rows of business class seats. I was there in seat 2F, you can see. In great seat for me, really, and the business class service is something we'll talk about. No jetties, no air bridges here at Coolangatta, so you head on the ground floor down the corridor to leave the terminal at the best point for your aircraft, and quite a bit of infrastructure in place on the ground to support the movement of passengers, including this sun shelter. But you can see quite a bit of fencing, guiding to make sure people don't go wandering off around the apron, because everybody who's boarding an aircraft here at Coolangatta is doing so by walking across the apron. Interesting to see some of the other aircraft, interesting to see the tugs and the aircraft equipment. We had our tug ready for our pushback as we boarded the aircraft, but also this rather large metal structure which supports you getting onto the aircraft. No steps, and of course they need to be able to board wheelchairs and certain other items and bits of equipment, so you have this ramped access to the aircraft, which is interesting, but the structure is obviously quite substantial. So soon we were on the 737-800 for this Qantas flight, settling into my seat there, seat 2F, travelling with my family, with my daughter to my left. All of my equipment and bits and pieces there as I settle in. Our iPads are mounted on the very simple little leather feature on the seat, and it wasn't long before the aircraft was pushing back from the stand onto the apron, ready for our takeoff from Coolangatta. As I say, a short taxi, and our takeoff from Coolangatta actually took us north initially, and then the aircraft was entering into quite a steep 180-degree turn. But that meant we got some great views of the beach, of the area, of the sea, and you can see that departure here on this Flight Radar 24 extract. But soon we were inland, heading south towards Sydney, approaching the airport at Sydney from the north, but quite a straightforward approach as we just took ourselves straight into Sydney Airport from the north and then taxied to our stand at the domestic terminal. Once we'd settled into the cruise, it was time for the food and drink service to start. Fairly good provision, although really 11:50 departure, served after 12 o'clock, well into lunchtime really, and we had a breakfast offering with an omelette, some bacon on top, and potatoes with a pastry, an interesting but rather dark for me bar of chocolate, a breakfast bar, a protein, a glass of wine and some water. An interesting mix, and one has to reflect really on a lunchtime flight whether we might be better off being served lunch, but I suspect the food had been loaded at Sydney on the outward flight, and it's easier for them to cater with the same meal out and back. So no doubt the Qantas accountants have got to grips with that, but food was okay. It's pretty generous offering really on a flight of just over an hour, but I'd already had my breakfast and I didn't really fancy another one, but it was my lunch now, and that's how things were. So good to be able to eat with some nice views out the window as we made our way south. And it's also great, of course, with a flight like this with Wi-Fi, when the aircraft doesn't have any information on the flight, to be able to dial into Flight Radar 24, stick it up on the seat mounting there, and keep an eye on our progress. If you're an aviation geek like me, no doubt you'll enjoy being able to do that. It certainly helps you understand a bit more about where you are, what you're doing, how the flight's progressing, and so on. Soon, of course, our food and drink had been cleared away and the cabin was being prepared for our arrival into Sydney. Quite a fast approach as we were straight in from the north, and it's quite interesting just to watch our descent, but I thought I'd let you, the viewer, have a look at that as well as we make our approach into Sydney. As we taxied into our stand here at Sydney's domestic terminal, it was great to be parking right next door to what I would call an MD-95, or you may prefer to call the Boeing 717, the aircraft next to us there just coming into view. So you can see I've made it off the plane, taxi into the city in Sydney, and I'm in my apartment now, 69th floor, pretty reasonably priced apartment here, all self-service, but a great view out over the city and the harbour. Not quite the Sydney Opera House and the Harbour Bridge, but hey, I couldn't afford that, but it's only just round the corner out of view. So some great weather here in December, of course, in Sydney. The sun is shining, high temperatures in the early to mid 30s, clear blue skies. Well, that was a great flight on Qantas on that 737-800. The domestic product here in Australia on all the airlines, whether it's Qantas or Virgin Australia, is a step above what you'd get in the US, but a significant step above what many of you will be used to on European airlines, where often it's just the same seats as economy with perhaps a spare seat in between. A great food and drink service, very short flight, so quite a rush to get everyone served and then clear up and get the cabin prepared for arrival. And I benefited from my seat on the right hand side of the aircraft with some fantastic views on departure from Coolangatta on the Gold Coast, with some great views of the beaches and the scenery of the Gold Coast. But sadly you can't have it both ways, so when we arrived at Sydney I missed out. If I'd have been on the left hand side of the aircraft, I'd have had those fantastic views of the Sydney Opera House and the Harbour Bridge. So always worth bearing that in mind if you're booking a flight, but you can't guarantee, of course, wind direction and which direction you're going to approach any runway from. So I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoyed the Qantas domestic service on a Boeing 737, and I'll catch you on the next video.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and click the notification button so you don't miss any of the great trips Mark has coming your way on this YouTube channel.